everyone, welcome to this episode of how to actually start a FiveM server. This is Mad Gigabit here. We are on part 2 of this series. So basically part 2 is going to talk about the type of network actually needed to run your own FiveM server. A lot of people think that, oh, it's easy, I can just self-host and run my own FiveM server off my home internet connection. For the most part, yes, you technically could, but I'm going to give you reasons why you shouldn't do that, in addition to the different types of hosting that one could get. So, for beginning, we have 3 different types of hosting possibilities. You have your self-host, which is where it's your own home internet connection. Next, we have a VPS, or a virtual private server. And we also have a dedicated server option. There's 3 different options. First, we're going to talk about self-hosting and the pros and cons to self-hosting. So for self-hosting, you're using your own internet connection. You're using your own bandwidth. You know, this is, depending on your internet service provider, this may be okay. Some, it may not be. One, you most likely do not have a static IP address as a residential customer. I know some internet providers, you can purchase one monthly and pay monthly for a static IP. That's fine, because an IP address has to be static for you to be able to keep a continuous address online for your server. Otherwise, you're going to have to constantly be changing your settings. People are going to be like, what's the IP address to this and whatnot. So you need a static IP. If you can't get one, there is alternatives. It's called a dynamic DNS. Basically, it's a bot that runs on your server or your router or whatever the case is, and it basically pings like every 10 seconds. You can figure it every 10 seconds, every 1 minute, 10 minutes, whatever the case is, and sees if your IP's changed. If it does, then it updates it automatically. But when you run into dynamic DNS, it can pose a lot of issues, because of the way propagation works for DNS. You also have to pay the power bill for your server, whether that's their computer or an actual server box. We actually self-host everything in-house here, but we have a fiber connection to the Comcast iBone, known as the backbone, and we're tapped into basically the direct fiber network all throughout the world. Our ping is less than 10 almost anywhere we go. And we have 4,000 megs down, 4,000 megs upload. That's 4 gigabits per second down, 4 gigabits per second up. Most people are lucky if they can even get a 1 gigabit connection download. Next, we have VPS. Basically, a VPS is hosted on a dedicated server. So imagine a pie. Okay, and it's cut into 8 slices. So the pie is a dedicated server, and 1 slice is a VPS. Basically, that means that you're sharing a big dedicated server with X amount of other people. The issue is a lot of companies will oversell. Basically, they're taking a gamble on what resources are going to be used. Some hosts don't do this, but a lot do. Let's say that server has, just for example, 100 gigabytes of RAM, just for example. Well, the issue with that is they're not going to sell just 100 gigabytes. They're going to sell 200 to 300 gigabytes of RAM. Technically, they're overselling, and that's so that way they can maximize their profits. Plus, your network traffic is shared with everyone else. You don't have a dedicated port to where you're getting your full bandwidth. So let's say that server is a 1 gig port speed. Just for example, let's say there's 10 servers on there. At max capacity, you could maybe get only a max of 100 megabits per second instead of the full 1 gig. The benefit and pro to this is that it is cheaper than buying or renting a dedicated server. If you're going through like a data center, you typically will rent a VPS and rent a dedicated server. However, if you co-locate, as in you buy a dedicated server, basically put it into a local data center and then rent their bandwidth and power and connection, that's called co-location. Most people don't do that for FiveM, so we're not going to really cover that. But the VPS is cheaper, but the resources are not dedicated in any capacity. Next, we have dedicated. Basically, dedicated means you have that whole pie. You have all those slices to that pie. This is the best option if you're wanting to start a professional server, a very intensive load-heavy server, or if you put a lot of money into your server, I would go the dedicated option, being completely honest, because if you go the VPS route, you could be gaming and have a patrol going on, then another person's server could get DDoSed and it's hitting that entire 1 gig port to that dedicated server you're renting your slice from. And so now you have no connection, or it's going to be very, very, very laggy. So I wouldn't do that. As far as internet upload speeds go, with internet upload speeds, I had successfully ran a FiveM server for a test on a 35 megabit per second, 35 Mbps upload speed connection. I did have a gig down. I was able to do this. Do I recommend it? No. I currently have a server on a 3 gigabit per second connection. It's overkill for FiveM, and I openly admit that. I would say a minimum upload speed needed to run, just say, a basic 20 slot FiveM server with people on it, with all the resources and whatnot. I would say a good upload speed would be around 100 megabits per second. I would say this because that way there is not too much overhead for upload, especially if there's other people in your household. I would go this route, at least 100 megabits per second. If not, look into a VPS or a dedicated server option. Next is port forwarding. Not every internet service provider, especially if you're using a hotspot, you cannot run a FiveM server off of a hotspot. I want to make that clear. Some ISPs will not port forward. They will not allow ports to be open, which means that your players will not be able to connect. You will be able to connect internally on your local area network, so from computer to server, if it's in your house self-hosted. You will need to port forward your router. You will need to understand how to do that. You will understand IP tables as well for your firewall. You need to understand TCP UDP ports, rate limiting, MTU size. You're going to have to understand all of this, because if you do not port forward, no one will be able to connect to your server. Also, please be aware, if you self-host, or even if you are on a VPS or dedicated, DDoS attacks are common in FiveM servers. You get trolls in that get banned, they grab your IP address to the server and they DDoS that server. You need to understand how to mitigate this. You need to understand how to prevent and protect yourself from a DDoS attack. Basically, a DDoS attack is it's a DDoS or a DOS attack, depending on if it's more than one server or a botnet being used to attack you at the same time. So basically, it's sending a ton of packets to your computer, to your server, your computer, whatever. And as it's sending it, it's going faster, faster, and it's going so fast that the server that's running the FiveM server can't keep up between the game traffic and this DDoS attack traffic, because it looks the same. So you're gonna have to know what you need to buy to stop this. We run a very strong firewall. We have a carrier grade class internet connection. It could actually supply a whole city of internet. I have a Juniper ACX 2100 here off of a Metro E backbone from Comcast. We have the capabilities. We are more than willing to host someone's FiveM server entirely at a very affordable rate monthly, and you'll get our dedicated support as well. But you also need to understand that some internet service providers will not allow you to run a server. Some companies, especially these wireless ISPs we see popping up, these WISPs, they will not allow server hosting. Starlink is the same one. You cannot run a server off of wireless ISP. Some cable companies will not allow you, because here's this. There is still cable companies, and I know this from my experience because one of our core founding members of Pittsburgh Roleplay had a 1.5 terabyte data cap. Comcast has a data cap if you're not inside of the Northeast division. You need to make sure with your internet service provider that you can run a server, because one, it may work and then you get caught. You find out they don't allow it. They could terminate your connection right there and then. They could say, nope, we're no longer going to give you any internet, depending on the severity of the infraction. Also, you need to understand, depending on your connection, unless it's unless it's a Metro E install like this, you do not have access to the backbone. You do not have access to any sort of fiber backhaul. We have direct access to the backbone through Comcast for the Metro E install we had done for our hosting company and our roleplay community. You do not have that for your ISP. I guarantee you, you do not. You are going to have to go through the residential hops, and those residential hops are very slow. They're not used to this amount of traffic, this quick of traffic. We have players from Australia, Ireland, we have them all over the world, and they get low ping because we have direct access to that backbone. You do not. I guarantee you, you do not. So you really need to either consider a VPS, a dedicated server, or like I said, we own our own hosting company. We are more than welcome. We have a ton of resources. We're very open, honest. You see me here on YouTube right now watching this video. I'm all over TikTok, Twitter. We have our own hosting company with an easy to use panel. You get FTP access. We can help you with anything you may need. We also do very affordable liveries and graphics. We do website hosting and design. We can set up your Discord. If you are very true to setting up and running a FiveM server, we're a one-stop shop. And I want to make it clear that this is an educational series video. If you want to host your own for a development server or whatever you want to do. But I've been through all of this. I've been through on a VPS. I've been through a dedicated server. I do self-hosting now. I had it on a residential connection, which was not the best. But please listen to what I'm saying, and please understand the risks of self-hosting. Not to mention, you could easily get doxxed online. Someone could find out your identity and city and address and everything just from your IP address. So stay safe. Be sure to subscribe, like, comment down below if you're interested in our hosting as well. Thank you.